G'day, friends and fans, and welcome to Dave Talk Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 17th of August 2025. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Elsebound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire, Part 1, available now. All my books available on Amazon. Now, thanks to all those who support the channel. You can support the channel by buying my books, buying my merch, joining my patrons, or just like, share, or subscribe. Thank you to all those who do. On with the news, which we have the hypocrite of all the hypocrites. No, not Zelensky, the Guardian. They want to talk about truth and misinformation, yet all they do is repeat Zelensky's talking points. The Ukraine war, oh no, Russia refuses a ceasefire. They don't want to end the war, says the man who won't negotiate or uphold a ceasefire. Of course, this man has never honoured an agreement in his life. Remember when he promised peace in 2019? Remember that he promised he wouldn't plunge Ukraine in the debt? You remember when he promised the Russians would never invade? Then, of course, he called Putin weak and said that he'd do nothing about the Donbass. And then demanded they hand over Crimea. And it's like, he's your typical Beta or a rook. Beta! Not Beto. It's Beta, I tell you. Of course, there he is getting his marching orders in his earpiece. Look at the bags and the Bozo! It's just for men. Look at the craze. You think he would... Yeah, you think his hairdresser would comb that one out? All right. Oh, wait. See, they did clip it out. They put the skin. You don't cut it. You put a little bit of Just for Men on your comb, Zelensky, and comb it. Gosh, didn't anybody teach you Grooming 101? Of course, that's why he's not wearing Hugo Boss, right? He does, with his stupid trident. That's they're cultural appropriate. Oh, you don't know, do you? First settlers of Crimea were most likely Greek. That's why and of course, he's not Ukrainian, folks. He's Russian. Well, ethnically, I believe there's a little bit of Turk in him, but I'm not sure. But he's definitely a fucking moron. But everything now hinges on him doing the right thing. And the US president has changed his mind based on his conversations with the Russian president, in which he says he prefers now a direct peace accord as opposed to a temporary ceasefire. However, Voldemort has said, "No, bro, I want everything." We'll get to that in a moment. But he has agreed to meet with President Trump as if he was given a choice. All right. You know the drill. Not much is going to be really talked available. The media's going to blabber on for the next 24 hours. But Trump, cards close to his chest, he's not going to let much information out. But the media's going to talk about the horrific war and how Russia's a war criminal and how Trump made a mistake by humanizing the Putin, we cannot talk his name, you know. They say he's humanizing the Russian president. The Russian president has a blood on his hands. How many journalists has Zelensky killed? Oh, they won't talk about that. Wonder, did he actually pull the trigger himself, or did he just have his little minions do it while he sat back behind the screen and says, I have no blood on my hands? It's amazing. All the people who support Gaza also support Ukraine, despite the fact that Ukraine gets some of its arms from Israel and supports the hypocrisy of the left, right? Round and round it goes. All right. Particularly when it comes to freedom, human rights, same with liberals in general, We stand for free speech, except hate speech. We stand for human rights, except for Russians, right? Yeah. That's how. All right. Day 1270, diplomacy. Well, the ball is pretty much now in Europe's court because Zelensky has no say at all. European leaders, France, Germany, United Kingdom, promised to maintain the pressure on Russia through sanctions and ironclad security guarantees for Ukraine, comrades. We're going to send our children to war just to keep Zelensky in power, comrades. So I have no interest in stopping the war. Ukraine claims to have shut down the Russian drones, and they actually admit that missiles and drones hit 12 locations. Well, they know you're going to shoot some down. That's why they send so many. Dumbass. All right, so we have Russian forces supposedly pushed back. Pushed back, we tell you. We're winning. We're winning the war. We liberated something. A fish. I can't even name what it is. So, what is that, fishing village in Sumny? If you know the map of Ukraine, you'll know what. You'll know what. I'm just sarcastic. It was a field, right? A wheat field. We liberated a wheat field. We saw some Russian soldier stopping for a piss. We shot him and said, everybody, this field is now liberated. It was probably one of their own anyway. But, however, if you push back Russian forces, oh yes, they'll say, oh, but this is different. This is different. But they always say, but they killed a Ukrainian drone attack. You know, the Western media, no see, then we no see. That's what's, yeah. Wow. For a country interested in peace, Ukraine sure is doing a lot of shooting. And for a country complaining about attacks on infrastructure, they sure are doing a lot of attacks on infrastructure. But it was possibly an accident or industrial sabotage. But they did attack a militia depot, allegedly, because they're only showing pictures and, yeah, media unsupported. It's the same over and over again. The Russians is probably a decoy. Alright, so the situation on the battlefield as we go around the map is there is shelling across the border on both sides. There is no indication where the Ukrainians allegedly pushed back the Russians. And then when we look, they're fighting in... The Ukrainians aren't liberating anything in Sumy. They're trying to take a Russian village. They're not liberators. Okay? People who complain about Russian invasions shouldn't be trying to take other countries. They'll say, "Oh, cope and seethe. We're just trying to create a land swap. We're from the occupiers. We'll offer it back if they give us back our territory." And then Russia squashes them like a bug and says, "Cheaper to kill you," which unfortunately it seems to be the way it goes, in that Russia's taken more land in the north, but has pretty much not pulled the trigger on Kupiansk. But they have other areas where they were also stalled and also making minor advances. But across the battlefield, they've also hit much of the front line here. Not front line, the Zelensky line. Nothing's really happening in Chevashar, which means the Ukrainians and Russians are sitting there licking their collective wounds, I would say, dealing with the fact they've probably inflicted a little bit more than your average losses, but Russians made advances towards Peveskia, fighting in Sydney. Nothing much going on here. Probably these action reports are clearly not where they should be. Although they could be Ukrainian infiltrators. But most of the time when you look at battlefield, if you ever go to the Russian Ministry of Defense site, most of the time they don't post them there anymore. You have to go to their Telegram. And most of the videos are short. Really, you just hear a bit of rat-a-tat-tat and see some smoke. They're showing even less of the battles than they have in the past. But it all comes down to the fact that there are lots of Russian soldiers posting on BitChute, I think. But other than that, it's the same with the Ukrainian side. Ukrainian side, very little, far less than the Russians. But really, what we have is, as I said, the Russians are bringing up heavy artillery and going to spread the love. And speaking of love, they are advancing up here as well to spread the love. And of course, looks like they're defending their flanks, forming a cauldron on this while they come for cutting this off here. Probably by occupying or cutting here and cutting here simultaneously. With this road now making sense that these towns would fall back and use this road as an artillery line that vehicles would travel along here to fire rockets. Russia's taken a chunk, but not much of... Russia's taken a chunk out of, but Ukraine still holds on to some of Ronitsk and Krasnyi. And still, pardon me, holding on to Novi here and still holding on here as well. So there are areas where Russia is bogged down, particularly Pavlovsk, with Ukrainians harassing them on the flanks. As I said, the Ukis moved 1, 2, 3 lines of troops into this area. They tried to keep it as quiet as possible. They did not reinforce these towns, but they knew, as I rightfully pointed out, that the Russians, when they couldn't overrun Pavlovsk, were going to go around it and cut it off. Now, of course, don't have to be a genius, you just have to realise the last 3 years, Russia's been flanking the Ukrainians time and time again, and a lot of people are surprised that Ukraine has done little to protect its flanks before. So why now? Is that because I think, and only think, most of this line ain't going to move, okay? They're not going to move. Ukraine feels confident to move up its reserves. Not much of its reserves, however. 30,000 out of the 600 estimated, with around 300,000 trained. The rest basically made up of police and territorial guard from their border forces. But border forces aren't trained really as they're made out to be, as we've seen by often a lot of the heavy losses are territorial guards. Now, I don't know how it goes, but a lot of people have who claim to be inside have posted on their various Telegram channels how Ukraine has this layered defense system where they'll send the army in to fight the the Russians, and then the Ukrainian army would withdraw, leaving behind the territorial guard in the trenches. So when they fail to take a town, when their offensive fails, the Ukrainian army goes elsewhere, leaving behind the territorial guard. And basically, the army is always on the move on these roads. It's one of the reasons why they're spending so much on this war. It's because Ukraine is burning so much fuel per day moving around, trying to bolster, which is why you now and again get breakthroughs when the Russians either overrun them, cut them off, usually combination of both. But mostly also Russia, having a limited budget, isn't burning as much fuel, and they're moving around basically on, I kid you not, in some areas, and Yukis may laugh, but running around on electric scooters, the problem is it doesn't make as much heat signature, so it's and doesn't use anywhere near the fuel. So Russia's running on a budget, okay, and it's a quiet victory where basically Russia's able to creep, not caring what mockery the Ukrainians have, because at the end of the day, the Russians just keep winning. Now, of course, Russia would probably be winning even further if it wasn't for Western support, that's without a doubt. But for the West, particularly the Guardian, to say that Russia's the obstacle to peace, well, you only have to look at the situation on the ground and say, well, what are you winning? What are you fighting for? You're not fighting to liberate these territories. You're fighting to continue oppressing these territories. But the problem is the vast majority out there keep forgetting that Ukraine was at war with these territories before the Russians came. But of course they keep referring to it as the Russian war, never the war of oppression. So you never, it's like, sure, just never ask one side. You always have to get the story from, it's like a police interview. The police still, even if the police know you're guilty, they'll still interview you to get your side of the story so they can piece it together, because they always know the victim is always going to upscale and the criminal is always going to downscale. But what we have, however, is a unique situation where I think Putin is both downscaling his victories and, of course, his methods. But Ukraine is downscaling the truth about their side, their methods, and their history, to the point of lying. Whereas Putin is mostly leaving out the unpleasant stuff. Still, you may call it lying. But doesn't everybody leave out the unpleasant stuff? See, a lot of people ignore the fact that it wasn't just the main conversation, but subsequent small group discussions, including the presidential aide, who was there at Istanbul, was there in Turkey for the conversations with Zelensky and with Zelensky's pet, forget its name, and then Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Zelensky's aides, who helped him play the piano with the penis. All right. Gosh, would you work for a guy who plays the piano with his penis? Yeah, you can imagine. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm too hetero for that job. Way too hetero for that job. And for people who say, Zelensky's married. Yeah, sure. Just like Bill Clinton was married, yeah. Just like I'm sure that every intern under the desk was a biological woman, you know? Sort of what sort of president keeps a red dress in his closet? Or goes to, or Bill Clinton goes to Jeffrey's house in New York and wears a dress to pose for a painting. Yeah, man. Sort of puts Clinton and Hillary in a new light when you find out Bill had a red dress and high heels in his closet, you know. So the American side was represented, of course, by Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff. They didn't say who the third person was. Actually, a lot of times they leave out a lot of names. Mostly because I don't think they'll mean anything to anybody outside. Plus, it's like, hey kid, you're taking notes today, and the kid shows up and says, oh my god. Alright, so we have the fact that it wasn't the only topic, it was just the main topic. So I know I bring up a lot about Roosevelt and his crimes, but doesn't mean that everything Roosevelt did was a crime against humanity. And it's amazing that because one thing Roosevelt was good at was diplomacy. Though he failed most. He failed a few key diplomatic moments, but which it was unfortunate. But there were a lot of things that were out of his hands. And I think it's amazing how historically they're so forgiving of Roosevelt, but so hard on Trump, when Roosevelt was the one who ended up with World War II and Trump's the one who stopped World War III. But then you realise the newspapers want World War III because it sells more newspapers. Then that's sad. But of course it also kills off the right, if you figure that out. Hadn't figured that out, I meant. Alright, so Trump has suggested to Zelensky he makes a deal. I hope he was holding a 1911 to Zelensky's head at the time, but you know Trump, he doesn't do that. Has somebody else do that for him. Hey, but and you have to admit, it does depend on Zelensky. Trump has sat down with Putin. Okay, that in itself is a triumph in war. To get a leader of a country at war to set aside an entire day to come for a cup of tea is a huge diplomatic effort on its own. And the fact that so many, including the Communist News Network, clutch their pearls and say, he's humanising the man with the blood on his hands. Their constant horrendous war, horrific war. They've only got, they only have two modes: constant negative and constant gaslighting. It's never a switch on the truth. With most of CNN, they have a few people who basically they're trying to be neutral, but the only sensible voices are their new hires, but they still have their paranoid, delusional DEI hires. Now, a lot of people are pissed that there was no ceasefire. Well, too bad, so sad. You don't get your way on the first date. Come on. What sort of hustler are you? Alright, so Voldemort once again proves that he is not interested in peace and he wants more sanctions, tougher penalties. Doesn't even know what the penalties are. Trump just said to him that there will be sanctions and he says sanctions are an effective tool. Nah, well, he's an expert on being an effective tool, right? Sure. Penis is the most effective tool to play the piano, Zelensky. I'll take your word for it. Alright, so this buffoon who's only good at soaking up money and wasting people's lives. Speaking of fools who waste people's lives, the Eurofash has decided that they'll continue arming Ukraine. Because, comrades, the party is always right. You've got to keep the money flow. Otherwise, you don't get kickbacks. Didn't you do Corruption 101 at university? Oh, you didn't go to the WEF University of Buffoons? Well, did you know most leaders of Europe went to the same university as Putin? Oh, you didn't know that? Well, a lot of them did. The WEF. And then, after attending the WEF, Putin declared them, and he's the only one who've ever done this, by the way, to declare publicly that the WEF are a crime against humanity. And of course, all of a sudden, there were all these wars and breakups and trouble all across Russia. Until then, things were going peacefully, swimmingly. The moment he broke with the WEF, all the other WEF muppets started grumbling and complaining about, it's cold, Russia doesn't give us enough money, Putin is cold. What a stupid argument, right? Georgia. No, I kid you not. Georgia complained that the Russian leader was too cold. Man, are you a world leader or a freaking member of a quilting circle? Oh, he didn't serve the tea at the right temperature. It was too cold. But Trump tells Zelensky, listen here, buckaroo. I set the agenda. You do the I'm sorry. All right, so trilateral meeting has been proposed for as early as August 22, according to Axios, citing people familiar. Oh, yeah. Hello, Guardian, I got a new story for you. What? Okay. Hello, Axios, I got a new story for you. All right. But Putin isn't the only one who wants this war over. And believe it or not, Putin does want this war over. Mainly because it saves him pulling the trigger. Trust me, I think Putin wants to sit back and watch what happens to Zelensky as he dissolves into irrelevance. Because remember, there is nothing worse for a narcissist, particularly someone like who has their hand in the cookie jar, to no longer have a job, to no longer have that hand in the cookie jar, to no longer have power or relevance. Okay? He's not like an ex-US president who can, show up at celebrity events or go to colleges and universities or go to these big institutions, these so-called think tanks where thinking allegedly takes place. Unlike a concentration camp where we know there's lots of thinking going on because you've got nothing else to do. Very concentrated indeed. Concentrate, my friends. Concentrate. All right, so Ukrainian delegation last time, as you know, were kicked out. No agreement was signed because Zelensky, he eventually apologized, in which he expressed his regret. He also agreed to start negotiations. And what happened? It's taken how long now to get him to come around and have those negotiations that he's been promising for a while? Yeah. You trust Zelensky? I've got a 6th jab to sell you. It's safe and effective, very cheap. But Zelensky is allowed to bring friends. Now, Keir Starmer, Merkel 2.0, and Mrs. Bridget has decided that they're going to find some representatives to go along with them because somehow countries don't have diplomats to send with them. It's like, what? What are your diplomats for? I don't know. Go find them in some... They probably can't find them. They probably went to the embassy and said, hey, where's the diplomats? Oh, we haven't seen them in years. They're probably out. They probably lost them. They're probably still on bail. It's probably been detained. Somebody forgot to pay their bail. They probably got swept up in the ice raids at in one of the brothels. That's why they're struggling to find somebody to go to Washington. It's like, this is the weirdest story ever. But you can find stories in Germany, UK, and France that they can't find a representative to go with Zelensky. Nobody in the cabinet, nobody in the war ministry, nobody in the Prime Minister's office, none of them want to go with him. And it's like, what are these diplomats in Washington for? Well, apparently they can't be reached. So, I'm thinking, what's happened? Has ICE got them? Have they been swept in one of those crime sweeps in the red light district? They swept them up and nobody's come forth to pay their bail. What's happening in the UK? This is, of course, we should be celebrating even, I'm trying not to sound like I'm celebrating Russia's victories, nor enjoying Ukraine's losses, nor hope. I am actually trying to be apolitical here. I am just merely trying to bring you the news. And in the last few hours, you can see there's a lot more news going on in the world than Ukraine. And I think that's reflected in the viewership numbers, that most people are interested in Palestine or even Sudan or the situation in Syria. But my expertise is not... Well, I could study the maps and that, but in reality, as I've admitted before, my interest in this war is the story. How did we get here? Why can't we get out of this quagmire? And you're looking at Larry, Curly and Mo here, and you're definitely going, let's draw a knob on this one's head. This one's definitely a lizard man. And this one is definitely in the pleasure pits of, what's that? Is it Beelzebub, the one who's the alleged transgender demon or something? He's definitely, definitely in the, definitely asking. Excuse me, Mr. Rent Boy, but do you own a dress? And this guy's just, Mr. Rent Boy, come over here. And this guy is, you rent? You paid them money? You don't have them kidnapped off the streets? This trio, I mean, who voted for these Muppets? This is the scary part. Of course, the little flag on the side to remind you. Of course, the flags to remind you of their countries. But of course, their master is peering in on the side, just letting them know. And of course, they're highlighting the handshake, which they're both not. I would say they're not. Just Putin and Trump are not entirely what you call dishonorable. They're flexible. There's a total difference. Trump hates to commit to a deal when he knows there are variables that he can't talk about. And of course, I can talk about them because I'm not under some sort of secrecy deal. But of course, then again, I'm not privy to all the secrets. In fact, I'm privy to none of them. But I can guess, based on geopolitics, that China's threatening Taiwan, North Korea's threatening South Korea, India and China are eyeing each other off in the Himalayas, China's looking at Afghanistan, Siberia, Mongolia, Vietnam, Laos, just to name a few, China's all about peace, my friends. A piece of this, a piece of that. And, of course, Russia, you may say they want a piece of this and a piece of that, but actually what they want is for these retards not to station Mark 5 missiles 5 minutes from Moscow and then use them every five minutes to basically tear chunks out of the Russian economy that he is carefully trying to stitch back together just because these three imbeciles couldn't run a paper shop, let alone a country. And believe it or not, the economic skills to run a paper shop is all you need to run a country. If you can run a small office, you can run a country. If you can successfully balance your checkbook, you can run a country. There is no specific miracle skill you need to be Donald Trump, other than the 10 commitments. You have to be able to commit to your word. You have to be able to commit to your job, to your task. You have to be able to put other things before your family. There's a whole bunch of commitments you have to be able to meet. These three couldn't commit to a fucking relationship. This guy, he's in a relationship with Israel, Saudi Arabia, India, and, of course, international Marxism. This guy's in a relationship with the WEF, and possibly, and I'm only saying this as possibly the communist Chinese. So we got another possible one in an international relationship with the communists, or the Socialist Union, I should say. So these three, they are not in a relationship with their country. They have no commitment to their country. So this guy can't make a decision without looking at his wife. This guy can't make a decision without consulting his cabinet. And this guy can't make a decision without consulting her husband. And her husband routinely beats her. And these two are well-known cokeheads, okay? These two invited this guy along to Ukraine for a sudden visit, and the three of them, Miss Merkel 2.0 wasn't there, so Wanker 1 and Wanker 2 and Wanker 3 were on a train having coke. And not the refreshing kind. And that's why we don't have world peace. If they can't make... I forget all the list of commitments that you've got to make to be a good leader, but you have to be able to make commitments and put them... You have to be able to sit there, look your wife in the eye, and say, no, bro, you're number 11 on my list. And if you can't accept that, which a lot of women can't, by the way, if you look, the divorce rate amongst politicians is pretty much on global average. You even look at some of the world leaders, like, you ever see Xi Jinping with his wife? She lives in Australia, by the way. That's the sort of relationship they have. She flies in. Every time he needs her, she flies in. She doesn't live with him. Zelensky's wife doesn't live with him and has never lived with him since the birth of their last kid. And that's been well known that she only shows up for rallies. Macron, he and his wife, right? I mean, Bridget and his wife, Macron, they're rarely seen together. And when they are, it's usually a tosh, a good stash, right? Merkel 2.0, he's not a good family man, right? And Keir Starmer, he's always looking, for the last 10 years, all he's done is ever take orders from his wife. So, you wonder why the world's fucked up? It's the matriarchy. You look at how supportive Melania is compared to Hillary Clinton. You look at, here's another good leader that you can point to. Marco Rubio, sort of. Florida, DeSantis. Let's be fair. Okay, you want strong leadership, you often have to look to... there's probably better governors, and a lot of governors will tell you that the reason why they won't run for presidency is because it's a death sentence to their career, it's the money's not worth it. As for, they see what it does to the presidents and they go, no, bro, it's not worth it. It's a death sentence to their career, to their family life. If you're barely hanging on, the last thing you want to do is be Mrs. Bridget, right? But that's where we're at. And I feel sad that I'm not reaching enough people, but all I can do is ask and hope that you will understand that the algorithms are against me, You often hear, whether it's the pro-China channels or the anti-China channels, both of them complain that YouTube is the algorithms against them, but then you look at them and see that they get 1 million views, and it's like, wow, they're complaining and they get 1 million views? Right now, I'm complaining and I get 1,000 views and hardly any subscribers. So it's not just about the subscribers, folks. It's not just about the views. It's the fact that I'm sad the truth cannot get wings while the world's lies are in charge. The world's liars are in charge. Meanwhile, everybody points to Putin because it's a great distraction. It's easy to blame one person than it is to accept responsibility. And of course, that's what the left does and has always done, is blame others. And Europe is scrambling for the last 50 years to sell its lies. And it's been working because they have so many willing muppets out there willing to sit there and watch day after day the slop of the BBC. So many Americans used to watch the slop of the CNNs. But it is dying. It's a dying business model. It's a dying industry. And even YouTube now is a dying industry, yet we have yet to see the rot in YouTube. We've yet to see the collapse of YouTube, but we're seeing the same YouTube go down the same road of arrogance, ignorance, and hubris of cable. So you can support me on Patreon, and you can support me by buying my books, buying my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, or scan the QR code on the screen. Oh yes, it's also in my profile, hopefully. Yeah, they often hate when you put a link in your profile and actually cut it off, or they put up that, when they cut it in half and they say, click to see more. How many people click to see more, right? So, I really appreciate you though. And please, if it's just a like, it's just the way the algorithms are. I've got to keep asking, because I've got to keep reminding people that the algorithms are against me, And I really appreciate the loyal supporters, but I still appreciate all viewers, particularly those who go to the end. Thank you. And see you in the next video. Bye for now.